Explorers, welcome back to this Starfield Lorecast. Man, has it been a long time since I've been able to say that. This is your host, Tom, or Robots. I'm here with my good buddy, Dave Chaffins, exploring the stars. Dave, welcome back to the show. How have you been, man?
It's great to be here, Tom. I've been very well. I've been getting the dock ready, as they say. Getting the dock ready.
We have some surprises and reasons why we've been missing for the last few months, but we'll get to that in the middle of the show, because today's episode, we are diving into something that not a lot of people are discussing. On one of the interviews with Todd Howard just a few months back, he mentioned that one of the major influences on Starfield was the pen and paper role-playing game Traveler. And nobody's really talking about this. So we decided, in fact, Dave decided, give this credit to Dave, to write an article for our new website, starfieldinsider.com, which you can go check that out right now, where he dove into some of what that might mean and how that might actually affect the development and the design of Starfield, because we're still in that early speculation period. We don't really know the release date yet, and there's been a lot of leaks, and I'm putting that in quotes, and rumors, and we'll talk about that stuff on the second half of the show. So, Dave, welcome back, man. It's been a while. Things got delayed, but hopefully we're getting close to launch again. And I know you have some thoughts on this Traveler RPG pen and paper system. So are we talking like Dungeons and Dragons in space? Like, what's going on here?
I think we are talking for what people think Dungeons and Dragons is. Yes, it's Dungeons and Dragons in space. We could get into semantics. We could go through, the different types of systems, stuff that's inspired by old school D&D, or the modern 5e interpretation, or even other, powered by the Apocalypse games. But this is an older RPG that I think takes a lot of its inspirations from those first and second edition D&D games, and kind of turns it on its head in some ways and fashions. Yeah,
so this was published in 1977, the original version of the game, and there've been multiple re-releases and updates over the years. And I like that this connects back to what has been happening in game design for decades now. Like, we talk about Bethesda, and you can't talk about Bethesda without talking about the Elder Scrolls. And the original Elder Scrolls games, designed in the 90s, Arena and Daggerfall, a lot of the mechanics and rules of those games were pulled from pen and paper role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. And I feel like we've come full circle. We're back to, okay, new space game, new space IP, pulling concepts and maybe mechanics and things from pen and paper role-playing games. So what else do we know about Traveler? I've never played Traveler. Until this came up, I didn't even think to even go here and start researching it. But what kinds of similarities do you think there will be between what Traveler does and what Starfield does?
So I will preface this by saying that I've never actually played Traveler, but I'm big into collecting and reading a bunch of different tabletop role-playing games. So that's kind of why that got me interested in, like, okay, what is this? What is this whole system?
I remember as a kid getting my dad's first edition D&D book and never playing it, but poring over the world and the details and the mechanics, just trying to understand what even is this? Like, it's a tome to this mysterious world. So I have a feeling you probably feel the same.
I do, and I've spent good money on looking at some of those tomes for myself, of stuff that I haven't even played. It's just fun. It's just fun to look at. It's like game guides. But Traveler is a space-based RPG that came out in 1977. The interesting things that I think Traveler showcases is a lot of how Todd Howard has described Starfield in the past as being almost like a grounded experience. Like, Mass Effect is very high fantasy. Same thing for Star Wars. Like, it's very high fantasy, and Todd Howard's looking at Starfield as like, okay, let's look at modern science. Let's look at how that could inspire a future where space travel is something that can happen. And I think Traveler actually does a pretty good job of looking mechanically and saying, okay, this is how this could work. Sorry, go ahead.
So just to chime in. So, like, a more recent sci-fi connection would be The Expanse rather than Star Trek.
Yes, I would say that The Expanse is probably a good a good replacement for what a Traveler campaign could look like, or even Firefly. Is probably also one of the number one. When people say that they want to play a Firefly-like game, generally people are going to go to Traveler as the inspiration, because it's very much in that vein, though it's not necessarily a ragtag group of people that's going on various mercenary missions.
Right.
There's military conquest. There's, merchant trading. You could even like localize everything to just a few planets. Because Traveler grounds space travel. Generally, with these Traveler ships, it's taking you 1 week to fly to a new planetary system. So that comes into play of saying, okay, we have to have the fuel to get there. We have to have the resources to make sure that we're fed for a week to get to this other place, because we're all just going to be sitting around in the spaceship until we get there. And we also got to, figure out how do our characters advance in that time when you're playing this game, which I think makes sense rather than like a faster than light travel, which is typical for sci-fi. Traveler says, okay, let's focus on jump drives. Like, this should be the Wild West of space, not necessarily some, risk map where we're flying all to different places.
Yeah. It's more grounded in the actuality of what it might actually be like to be traveling around in space, because let's be honest, we're not just a few hundred years away from like warp light speed or faster than light travel. Like, that seems like something still very, very far away. But to create some sort of better engines than what we currently have, so that you could travel between far distant points in like a week, that sounds a little bit more reasonable. But it creates a lot of downtime. There's a lot of travel is very expensive still, because of the time it takes to maintain human beings for a week, and to invest a week in getting from one place to another.
Right. And Todd Howard had even said that in several interviews about the kind of vibe that Starfield is space travel is dangerous. Like, going out in space, it should be a dangerous thing in Starfield. It's not going to be, we get on the ship and we just go about our merry way. There's going to be some stakes involved with that. And I think Traveler, just the nature of the game, the nature of the travel, is a representation of that danger itself.
Yeah. Another point here, and this, I noticed this when kind of looking through some of the details, is that everything, even like communication at a distance, only travels so fast. So, for example,
yes.
if we're on Earth and we're sending information to the Mars rover, even if it's traveling at the speed of light, that still takes a long time to get from Earth to Mars because of the vast distance. So it's not like, again, like Mass Effect or Star Trek, where all of a sudden you just have like instantaneous communication between 2 points and at very extreme distances. If you are significantly far away from somewhere else, you aren't sending messages back and forth. It's just not happening, because there's no technology to do that. So you are very isolated. Not only does travel time take a long time, but once you travel somewhere, you're off on your own.
And if you think about that in the context of their Wild West inspirations that they had for this, that makes sense, because back in ye olden days, if bandits take over a town in the middle of, nowhere, Montana or Idaho, I'm not picking on any states here, but if they do that,
don't add us. Yeah.
Don't add us, Montana. If they do that, then people may not know in the big cities. Like, people in Grand Rapids may not know the exact day that bandits are there. And so somebody could show up later on and all of a sudden the town's deserted. And you're like, okay, why did this happen? Like, there's some mystery to what's going on, even though the civilization is there.
Yeah. It's not like they could just pick up a cell phone and be like, hey, somebody shot my horse, I need a ride. Like, that doesn't happen. Yep. You spend a week walking back to town through the desert and hoping that you can survive on cactus juice. Right. So, but we know in the game that they didn't want it to be too punishing. So there are systems in place not to make it too punishing. But the sense of what I get from this is that the story, the vibe of the world, the situations that you end up in while traveling and exploring will be much more grounded, like in Traveler, than in something like Mass Effect.
I do think that you're right. I think that the level of engagement that your character is going to have is going to be grounded in that science and world, and I think maybe more grounded in the emotion of what space travel could be.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else were you able to gather from your research? What else do you think?
I would love to talk about just kind of character creation, which I had looked into. I had just assumed that, there's, in D&D, there's classes. And if you're going to be, in the modern 5e interpretation, if you're going to be a bard, there's a certain level of like, okay, once you're level 7, you get this spell, this, like there's a guide almost to it where you're kind of locked into a certain thing. Character creation in Traveler is very different, where most of your characters, you're coming in at a almost like midpoint of your life. Kind of like if you remember System Shock 2. System Shock 2 is...
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going back.
We're going back to some sci-fi games.
This is old school. Okay.
You make choices in that game that influence your stats. And your choices are like, I'm going to spend a year in the Marine Corps and track down rogue agents on a different planet. Or I'm going to be a naval mechanic and repair ships for a living. This is much like that, where there are certain terms in the game where your character, before the campaign would even start, is already involving themselves in stuff. So there's stuff like you could be going to university, and then you'd have certain roles for how you did in university. You could graduate, you could drop out of university and then say, okay, well, that didn't work. I didn't get the exact thing that I wanted. So maybe I'm going to go work on a factory for a while. And then let's say the factory gets raided by pirates. Then you're saying, okay, well, maybe I should be a pirate. And then by the time you come around to your character has had all these experiences that then define their skills that they have in the game, essentially what they can do.
Right. Which sounds a lot like the real world. I mean, I've worked many different jobs and I can pull experience from all of those different things to be the person I am now. But if I were to go back to like high school and say, okay, who is Tom going to be for the next 20 years? I wouldn't have been able to pick that path. Like that as a character class wouldn't make any sense.
And it was interesting to go back and kind of look at the history and how, the modern edition is very different from the older edition. But the most famous thing about Traveler is that your character could actually die in character creation. You could roll bad for essentially this character's health, and they could just die, and you'd have to start over.
Wow. That's
Since
so
then,
weird.
That rule is an optional thing. But back in the day, that was part of the core rules of the game.
That's hilarious. That's okay. That's so weird. I guess it makes sense. Like it creates a certain realism around it. Like, yeah, the pirates came and attacked the factory you work at and you happen to be one of the casualties. Sorry. Start over. Try a new character.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we look at, what Starfield is doing just from that basic official gameplay demo, we can look at some of the different things that you can do and put into your character. Like obviously they have cosmetic options, but if we're looking at backgrounds and traits, they have a number of different things on here that your character could already be experienced in when we start the game. Like I'm looking at them here that you've got like a gangster or a diplomat or a beast hunter or a bouncer. Like there's a number of different classes that all have starting skills associated to them, much like Traveler does, where I've chosen this path, then that gets me these skills that I can use, which I think from a roleplay perspective is pretty different from what most Fallout games especially have. Elder Scrolls in some sense, where you're going through your list of acrobat, battle mage, or stuff like that. But these are more like jobs that you're doing and the skills that you get for them, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, it's like a job system. Absolutely. Yeah, so that makes sense though. Like as you do things, you gain skills from doing those things. So it's like a backwards looking character development rather than the forward looking, anticipate where you're going to go next kind of character development. That's very, very, it matches some of what we know already, having seen the character design screens and stuff like that. So I think this is probably a really solid influence on that.
The thing that was most interesting to me in that Starfield, I think it was Constellation Questions, is Todd Howard. One of the first things he programmed on the computer was a digital version of this game. So he would have had to go through and look at those basic mechanics back from the first editions of this game and say, okay, these are the terms that they go. Like, oh, you could go to university. You could do, like, he's already, even before he's working at Bethesda, programming these backgrounds for characters within that game. The other interesting thing, I think, is traits. Obviously, when you're doing these things can go wrong. So, like, your character could come out of working at a factory with like a limp or something because he dropped a giant space boulder on their leg. So that is like representative in your character when you play Traveler. And traits in this game are really interesting because there's a lot of things that you could, I guess, happen to your character from like their background. Like one of them, my favorite one, is you have a small starter home on a moon, but you have to start with a mortgage that you owe to the bank. So that's like within Starfield itself, that's like an option you can take as one of your traits within the game.
This is too real.
It's too funny because it's like, okay, yeah, I got to deal with my mortgage. Like, I'm a cyber runner for Constellation, but I've got to deal with my mortgage. Or there's another one where like your parents are still living, so you have to pay. Like, you have to send like 10% of your credits back to them. It's like, got to support mom and dad back home. They've got needs. They need to make sure they get their Jamba Juice every day. So a trait aspect and a background aspect is a really interesting way of doing a modern RPG character creator. And I think Traveler gives a lot of those, I guess, like acorns, little nuggets of inspiration in there. Yeah,
no, that's cool. And again, it tracks with some of the things that we know are actually in Starfield. So it sounds like the more we dig into this, the more that there are really solid explanations. And I mean, it really just feels like when Todd talks about how this has been a dream of his and theirs for a long time, that maybe he's going back to his Apple II days and childhood and going, this is the game that I had in my brain when I was 12 years old and just have never had the opportunity to make it.
I think you're right. And Todd Howard has never had an original IP to work on at Bethesda. He's either worked on Elder Scrolls, which is not his original IP, or Fallout, which is not his original IP. Right. So this is the first thing that he's like making as an IP, as a product, as a universe, and putting out there. Right. So anything else of note that you came across? Of note, a few different things. Spacecrafts are very much modular in their design. Like, you have a little map of where your spacecraft is, and you're filling it up with various equipment. I think it's even more modular in Starfield, where you're like putting in different rooms and arranging how everything is. They showed that off. I think there's some similarities there. The other thing that Traveler doesn't have any like magic system or anything, but there are psionics. Yeah, which are kind of like mind powers. So we haven't seen anything like that. And there's ways of explaining it, but people are like, oh, is there going to be space magic in here? And I don't think we're going to get full into, Dune realms or, Star Wars realms, but they limit actual psionics down to, I think, about 6 things: telepathy, clairvoyance, telekinesis, awareness, and teleportation. That's 5 things, excuse me. That's okay. So I think having that limited set is way easier to say, okay, that's something that we could do through like an implant or something in the brain. So I think I would like to see something like that, but there's been no confirmation on if anything psionic or any kind of like special magic like that. But I would be interested in seeing that if they're thinking about adapting other things from Traveler. Yeah. I don't think we've seen anything that hints at that specifically, that at least that I can recall. If we're wrong about this, please let us know and be like, hey, there's actually a little bit here in one of the character screens or whatever, because sometimes that stuff does slip in. But yeah, I'm not against that kind of stuff, especially if there's like a technology justification for it. And who knows, maybe even alien technology justification for it, something like that. One of the initial backgrounds, I believe, if we go back and look at what they showed off, was actually, or one of the traits was like alien mutation or alien test subject. It didn't have any details on that. So like there is some, it seems like genetic things going on that they're mixing with some of the characters. So I think there is some weirdness out there. I think weirdness is confirmed. Full on psionics are not, but it would be interesting to see if they have anything from that Traveler RPG in there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Any other notes? Because I've got some stuff to pull up if you're interested in expanding out to see like what the wiki says. I thought it would be fun.
I'm interested in expanding out the wiki here. If you want to start expanding on some stuff, let's go.
Well, I thought it would be fun to just kind of take what is on the wiki and which is a nice summary of the things and then be like, oh, this matches here. Or this might make sense for this. So for example, this is like the Wikipedia wiki entry for Traveler, the role-playing game. Just to give some people a background here. Science fiction role-playing game, first published in 2077 by Game Designers Workshop. And then you might know some of these names, you might not. Mark Miller designed Traveler with the help of Frank Chadwick, John Harshman, and Lauren Wiseman. And of course, it has gone on since that time with many different editions and versions of the game. And this is interesting. This is the description. Traveler is a tabletop role-playing game. Characters journey between star systems, engaging in exploration, okay, ground and space battles, all right, and interstellar trading. That all sounds par for the course. This all sounds like, okay, things that we can expect for Starfield. One player, the game master or referee, oversees task attempts and guides events as the player explore the setting. So it's like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of setting where you have a game master. Characters are defined not by the need to increase native skill and ability, but by achievements, discoveries, wealth, titles, and political power. So that might give us some inside perspective on maybe how your character grows as you level based on the things you achieve, the things you discover, the things you accumulate over time. Like that could make sense for like a character design kind of thing.
Right. How do you measure that reputation? Because it seems like from their description of Starfield, Constellation is a guild that's focused on exploration. So how do you gauge that? And if you think about old Elder Scrolls games, like, your Thieves Guild is measured on how much gold you steal. Your Fighters Guild is measured on how many, things that you like. Think in Elder Scrolls Online. It's like, how many Daedra did you kill?
Right.
I think there's a way that you could use reputation to kind of fill a lot of those 5 things that they mentioned.
Right. And then there's a key features list, which includes commerce and some descriptions here. So commerce is the major driving force of civilization. Okay, interesting, right? Like commerce is the driving force. Everything's about being able to expand commerce, trade, make a living, that sort of thing. The game is human-centric but cosmopolitan. So the core rules focus on human characters, but there is support for using and playing aliens. Seems to track for Starfield.
Yes.
Limited communication. There's no faster than light information transfer, meaning no Ansible, subspace radio, or similar. Communication is limited to the speed of travel. Decisions are made on the local level rather than by a remote authority. So that whole like isolated Wild West kind of thing we were talking about.
I think in the game there's Freestar Collective, the United Colonies. There's a few different factions of like how they govern their systems is more like, oh, this is only our purvey is this particular area. Outside of that, we're not dealing with it.
Yeah. And then there's a section on morals and morality. People remain people and continue to show courage, wisdom, honesty, justice, along with cowardice, deceit, and criminal behavior. So you have the whole spectrum of individuals, which I think the subtext of this is it's not necessarily a dark, terrible future, right? This isn't like some sort of grim, dark sci-fi thing. This is grounded in the reality of how people are. And people are people. Some people choose to do good things at times, and some people choose to do bad things at times. And everybody can make those choices, and everyone's kind of on that spectrum depending on where they're currently making those choices. And there's this very wide reality of how humans can interact. And That seems to, again, par for the course with what we've seen.
That makes sense, and that lines up with the vibe that Todd Howard is putting off. I'm gonna be talking about Todd Howard's vibes a lot.
It all comes from the leather jacket.
It does.
And then sociological, so interstellar society is socially stratified, high, mid, and low passage. SOC, social status, is a primary character attribute. Affairs are often managed by independent nobility who make use of classic titles such as Baron, Duke, and Archduke. So from a social level, even though everything's very commerce focused, which would make you think like capitalist, more modern kind of take on things, from a sociological standpoint, it's way more hierarchical, like almost monarchical in its organization.
Yeah, I think we're looking at Princess Leia. Like, you're looking at those kind of like selected to a planet. I am the nobility on this planet, and I'm sending you to do X and Y for me, and you will get a reward or reputation for that.
Right. So you might have some planets that are more open, free democracy type systems, but then there might be, because of the distance and because of the separation of communication and information, each space station or planet or whatever may have a different hierarchical system that they're using. So that also very interesting. And then you talked about the characters and the life paths and all that stuff. There is a section here on equipment I wanted to call out too. It says equipment emphasizes wilderness exploration, hazardous environments, and combat. As a result, equipment lists are heavy on vehicles, sensor equipment, communicators, rations, personal armor, and weapons. All of that seems to track absolutely for a video game.
I think so. And that's a lot of the original D&D exploration, where like your character, like in the older versions of D&D, your character is just kind of a guy with a little specialty. Like in 5e, there's a lot more like superhero-y abilities, but in the older ones, it's like, hey, you're going to go out there, you got to bring torches because you can't see anything, and you got to get the rations to make sure that you can make it a week out to the dungeon that you're going to get to. Like there's a lot of that DNA in there that has been shown in numerous video games, including a lot of the ones that Bethesda's worked on. Right.
And then there's the whole equipment, types of equipment, which is a very broad spectrum. So everything from low technology. So, and then the justification is, since primitive worlds exist near technological worlds, primitive weapons such as swords, shields, pikes, and bows are included. Characters often have some sort of blade skill for close combat, which again makes sense. You're going to have stratification. You're going to have different groups of people on distant worlds with limited amounts of technology. But then there's high technology. So cybernetics and non-sentient robots are also show up in equipment lists, as do artifacts from ancient civilizations. So having your little robot helper with you totally makes sense, but it's not the AI hasn't developed to a point where that has its own personality.
Right.
It's kind of separate in that way. And then there's the hard sci-fi flavor. So along with energy weapons, there's also a strong presence of slug throwing weapons such as rifles and pistols. The prevailing theory is that usually the most efficient way to stop someone is with kinetic energy or bullets. Because, I mean, if you think about it, you're in space and you shoot something at a kinetic object at a ship or a person's spacesuit and you puncture it, that's probably enough to depressurize and then remove all the oxygen, and then the person dies, right? Like, right. You don't need laser beams to do that. When you look at weapons
in The Expanse, where they're literally just like shooting like Gatling guns on the side of their spaceships because that's what works.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Right. One rivet of bullets through the middle of that hole could very much just end that ship. You don't have to blow the whole thing up. You don't have to hit it with lasers. And you also get the sense that you don't have like energy shields around things like a la Star Wars or Star Trek, right? It's just like, these are buckets flying around in space. And if you put enough holes in the bucket, everything pours out. So it goes on. If you want to go check out this wiki article, feel free. There's all sorts of stuff in here about it's a really nice overview of the system and even the possibility for ancient races and things like that, which could be a thing. I mean, I think that's where we're going with the story, is the rediscovery of ancient races and intelligent life, and if they're still there or not, that sort of thing. So this is the foundation for all of that.
Yeah, I was really impressed by the amount of information that was out there, the amount of additions that Travelers had to kind of advance it throughout the years, and the amount of customizations that you could add to the game when you play it. I'm very interested to see Bethesda's flavor of space, particularly in RPGs, because they're one of the few companies that still makes an RPG that is reminiscent of the freedom of exploration that you have at a tabletop.
Right. So, yeah. So if anybody's listening to this and you've played Traveler and you've got other insight or other thoughts for us, please either join us on the Discord. There's a link in the description for the show. There's a channel on there. You can share any of your thoughts on that stuff. Or again, check out starfieldinsider.com. Dave and I and a number of other people in the content creator communities that we're a part of will be posting articles. And so go bookmark the page. This will be a source. Even when you are waiting for another episode of this show, you will be getting articles about all the latest news, pieces of lore, gameplay tips, all sorts of different things on starfieldinsider.com. So go check that out. So Dave, let's take a quick little transition here because we're going to talk about some of the news and leaks that we've gotten over the last few weeks because we might be getting a release sometime soon. Let's find out. I hit the button now and it just stops.
It does it. I like it.
So that's our transition music. So Dave, we were told at E3 back right before we did the last episode of this podcast, before this one, that, sorry guys, we're delaying the game. It'll be first half of 2023. Well, guess what? This is the first half of 2023. We still don't have an official release date, but we do have some news and some rumors. The big news is that in just a week from now, I think it's the 25th of January, there will be a Bethesda Xbox conference. And then people got all excited about that. And then they found out, but Starfield's probably not going to be there. So, of course, everyone's like, oh, no, they're delaying the game again. Bummer. It's getting delayed. And then on Twitter, Xbox responded and said, or I think it was Xbox or Bethesda. I don't remember specifically. Somebody in the know responded and said, don't worry, Starfield's getting its own event. Information for that will be coming soon. So we might be looking at the 25th for Xbox Bethesda Showcase, which will be things like Elder Scrolls Online and Redfall and some of these other games, maybe Fable, right? But then maybe we're getting a February Starfield event.
I think that there is a possibility. It's definitely, from what they're saying, they're definitely not showing it at E3. Like it may be at E3. They might, show a little bit more of it, but
like waiting for the next E3 or
they're not going to wait to do the full, like how Fallout 4 kind of had, we're going to show it and then it's going to come out in 3 months. Like They like that marketing style of like, hey, here's the thing. Same thing for Fallout 76. Hey, here's the thing. They show it in the summer. It comes out in the fall.
Right.
There's generally like 3 or 4 months in between them like fully going deep on this kind of stuff.
The one difference here that somebody pointed out was the Oblivion release. Back when Elder Scrolls Oblivion was coming out, it got delayed as well. And then within like that next year after the delay, Bethesda put out a notification that was like, hey, we're going to have a big reveal thing for it. It's going to be coming soon. They dropped some stats for what you need for your PC to run it. That information came out. The big trailer dropped. And then a month later, the game launched. And it was just like boom, boom, boom. Within 2 months of all of a sudden messaging again, game came out. And it seems like they're, like you're saying, like traditionally they go 3 or 4 months, but like we could be within a month or two of whatever this Starfield showcase is of having an actual game release.
They like to keep it tight when they show stuff. I think that part of the reason that they showed that they were working on Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 is because that they were looking for, number one, they were showing off a new, like Fallout 76 was kind of a new experiment. And they were also looking for buyers. Like we know that now, that they were looking to be acquired. So they wanted to show off the things that they were working on and show to the public and get them interested in the IP and products that they were working on. So I don't think that that's a norm for them to show, like Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield so many years out. They like to do, hey, here's the game. It'll be out shortly. Like no waiting around for it.
Right. So we do know officially 25th, maybe we'll get a date for the Starfield event during that event, but we do know that event is coming. There are some leaks and some other things going around. One of which, back to the idea that maybe we're getting it sooner than later, is the idea that it seems like Bethesda or Xbox or somebody in that group will be doing some sort of trailer drop at the Super Bowl. So
I like that idea because Bethesda games are transcend what, the normal video game market combines. Like there are people that just play Elder Scrolls and that's what they play. They play Elder Scrolls and maybe they come in and play Destiny for a little bit. Like it's one of those core games that people, I will pick up that because it's whatever.
Bethesda.
Grand Theft Auto is
I killed dragons. I was the Dovahkiin. Yeah, I'm gonna play their next game. Yeah, like the Skyrim audience is gigantic. The Fallout audience is also very big. And so if you just remind those people during something like the Super Bowl that like, hey guys, remember us? We got another huge game, and now you can go to space, and it looks freaking awesome. Check out the trailer. Like, boom, you're selling 1 million copies right there.
Right.
So maybe, and that's February 12th. The Super Bowl's on February 12th. So maybe we get a trailer drop on February 12th. Does that mean we get a Starfield event the week before that and then a trailer drop? Or do we get the trailer drop with a notification that says Starfield release event on this date, and then we get an event later in February? Either way, it could work.
I think likely if they're going to drop the date, they're going to drop it during the Super Bowl, and they're not going to mention the full showcase. But in there, people will be like, "Oh, let's look and see what Starfield. Oh, that Starfield game. Let me Google that up." They'll probably already have that in their social media of when that full deep dive show is by the time that the Super Bowl trailer drops. That's my speculation for what if that scenario works. How it would play out.
Yeah. So potentially within just a few weeks, we could have an announcement and a release date, hard release date. Also, to kind of shore this up a little bit, there was some big event that Todd Howard and some of the guys from Xbox were at recently with some other notable internet people who happened to run into him, took some pictures, casually said, "Hey, we still getting Starfield first half of the year?" And he casually responded, "Everything's still on track." But that would be the messaging until you let people know that it's going to be late. You wouldn't want it's going to be late message to get out through a means like that. So even if you know there's going to be a delay, you're still going to just tell everybody in a comfortable setting like that, yeah, everything's fine, everything's on track, until you make an official announcement. So I don't know how much weight that actually carries. On the other side of the spectrum, there was a podcast episode where Mr. Matty Plays, who's very well known on YouTube, says that he has a source that has been accurate about many different things that says that we are, in fact, getting a delay to the fall. So, again, with a grain of salt, what does that actually mean? Is this somebody who really knows what this is, like somebody said that somebody else said kind of thing? It's hard to know. It's hard to know for sure.
I say rumors and speculation. I think that the sources that maybe you had a while back at the company, there's been so much change there, may not necessarily be a source for the things that you think you know.
Yeah, possibly. And that's, I guess, the last big news here is that Microsoft just let go of 10,000 employees. Was it 10,000? I think it was 10,000, right?
I think it was 10,000. It was across a multitude of their different brands and businesses, but Bethesda was one of them that had people let go, which is, terrible. You don't want that. You don't want, layoffs for any company. You want to make sure that your companies are running, lean with the appropriate amount of people. It's a real shame and a mismanagement that something would happen like that. Yeah,
it's unfortunate. Our hearts go out to anybody affected by this. Another perspective on this, though, is if you look at the total number of employees at Microsoft over the years, it has continually been growing very, very much. So even with 10,000 people let go right now, they are still above the total number of employees that they had last year at the company. So the speculation is that the company has grown very quickly, has acquired these other studios like Bethesda. And so there's going to be some redundancy. And so just from a getting things done standpoint, they need to cut some of the roles that there are duplicates of. And unfortunately, that is a thing that happens when companies acquire other companies. I was let go from a company, from a major corporation, because of redundancy and all of that. And it's not because those people were bad at their jobs or deserve to get fired. It's just, sorry, we already have 12 people doing this. We only need 8. And so they let 4 go. So our hearts go out to you if you are affected by that. And hopefully you'll land on your feet. Things should be better in the future. But that's the speculation right now. So far, we don't have an actual release date. But Dave, let's wrap this up because we haven't talked about any star facts, space facts, star facts, whatever we want to call it. We don't have any star facts this week. If you were just right now, if somebody was like, Dave, what's the release date for Starfield? And you just used your psionics and you reached out to the void and you pulled out the date from Todd's head. What is the date? And I'm going to pitch a date also, and we'll see who's right.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about what the winner gets.
The date that Starfield will release, and I have a few reasonings to believe this, is going to be June the 2nd.
June 2nd. Okay, so what is your justification? June 2nd, 2023 is 2023 this year.
Yes. They put out the trailer in February or March. That's about 3 or 4 months ahead. Now, what do I look at when I see my favorite video game is releasing? I look and see if it falls on the holiday weekend. But guess what? It's always the weekend after. It's never the weekend that we have the holiday, that we get the day off.
You always got to take work off.
Releasing a game because they don't want to work on the holiday weekend to finish the bugs.
Right.
Nobody wants to jump in on that. So it's going to be the weekend after Memorial Day weekend, which is that June the 2nd, a Friday.
Oof. All right. I'm going on a cruise. Like, I've got a vacation planned. I'm going to have to bring my laptop with me and hope that I can play the game not connected to the internet.
You'll have to get some satellite internet and games past that,
Oh, no. All right. Okay. So you think June 2nd, 2023. Yes. I feel like that's really close to Redfall. We know Redfall's releasing in May. They don't want to cannibalize their audience. There's a lot of speculation that this is going to get pushed back again, but we haven't seen anything, and I don't think they will. I think they're going to make it the first half of this year. I'm going to I'm jumping on a limb here, and I've made bold predictions before where I've been absolutely wrong. But the benefit is if I'm right, everyone will be like, how did you know? And I'll be like, space magic, star facts. I think we're getting a release on 3/23/23. 3/23/23.
Is that because Todd Howard once said that 11/11/22 just sounds like a good date, and so he wants to do another one?
Yes. So what is, like, it's the 23rd year, the 23rd day of the 3rd month. It's not going to be 2/23/23. That's too soon. That'll be too soon. But if we get a Starfield event in February with a trailer at the Super Bowl on the 12th, for them to say this will be out in the next month and a half, and that firmly puts it in the first quarter earnings. They haven't had a release in a very long time. I'm sure Microsoft is going to want to make some sales. And we've even seen things like Starfield images showing up on Xbox boxes for when you buy a console in China. And there's some other country recently. Like, they're starting to print this everywhere. It's in the ads for Game Pass. They are starting to gear up. And I could be totally wrong. And if I am, then I'm totally wrong. That's fine. But I think March 23rd, 23.
So, Tom, that's a Thursday.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever seen a video game come out on a Thursday.
Bethesda don't care none. They don't care.
If you are right about this,
they don't care. Movies come out on Thursdays.
That's true.
This is like a movie.
I'll give you the 23rd. Personally, I'll give you the 23rd or 24th.
Okay. but I think the date's going to make sense. It's going to be, well, here's the other thing. They could do it on March 3rd, 23, because one of Todd's justifications was if the dates match, like 11/11, then it doesn't matter if it's the backwards, which we are backwards in America, where it's month, day, year, or if it's the forward way, which is the European way of day, month, year, which is ascending, which makes more sense. They don't have to reprint things, right? It's the same date no matter what. So, but 3/3/23 seems too early, but it still has a ring to it, right? 2/3/23 would make sense, but you can't transpose it. 3/23 you can't really transpose, but who knows? Maybe it'll be 3/3. But the rules are whoever's closer wins. So if we're closer to your June 2nd date by like total number of days, before or after, you win. So if it gets delayed, no matter what, you're going to win this. If it comes out early, then I might win as long as it's earlier than like, I don't know, the beginning of May or something like that. So here's the stakes, though. Here's what we're going to win. And this is what we've been doing. This is why, I mean, the real reason we haven't done any podcasts in the last half a year is because it's all just been speculation and rumors and an occasional little video that Bethesda puts out. And we haven't really talked about that stuff for too much. But we're gearing back up. So hopefully you'll hear more of us more regularly. But the in-fiction reason that we've been not here is because Dave and I are building a spaceship.
It's official.
It's official. We built a spaceship. We're going to launch the spaceship on the day that the game launches. We're going to space because we're going to explore the space like they did in the game. And then we'll podcast from space. That's where we're going. That's what we're doing. So
the way you announced this sounded like you were announcing that we're having a baby. And I mean, same vibe. Same vibe.
Done that. You've already done that now. We don't need more babies. Maybe the spaceship is our baby. But like a baby, it needs a name.
Baby.
It needs a name. Our space baby needs a name. And so whoever wins this little competition gets to name our spaceship.
Oh no, I name all of my characters in every single game my dude. So whenever the text comes up, they're like, what is up, my dude?
Well, the spaceship isn't a character, but you could name it my dude if you want.
It would be like, let's take a ride on my dude.
My dude.
I'm more likely to win this bet, so we'll see.
All right. Well, I'm going out on a limb here. All right. So that's it for this episode. But definitely stay subscribed to the show. We will be doing more episodes as more news comes out. Go to starfieldinsider.com. Check out the articles that Dave and I and a bunch of other creators are working on to bring you all of the Starfield stuff. That is absolutely going to be a source for you for news and lore and gameplay and opinion pieces, all sorts of awesome stuff. So if you want to continually be ingesting Starfield news, even when you're not listening to this show, starfieldinsider.com. Go check that out. Dave, that's it for this episode. It's been good hanging out and talking again. You got anything else going on you want to share?
Yeah, I do a tabletop role-playing game that's playing Modiphius's Fallout 2D20, so it's all set in the Fallout universe. Right now we're in New Orleans doing a bunch of Fallout stuff down there. I do weekly episodes that comes out every Friday. It's called Rad Rolls. You can get it on every single podcast service, and you can get it on YouTube for the full video version.
Awesome. Yeah, go check that stuff out. And wherever you're listening to this, you can listen to those things. So just look it up on whatever podcatcher you're using. And of course, I've got all my shows, the Fallout Lorecast, Elder Scrolls Lorecast, Lord of the Rings Lorecast, Mass Effect Lorecast, and Witcher Lorecast, all available at robotsradio.net or whatever podcatcher you listen to this on. And that's going to do it for this episode. It's good to see you again, Dave. It's good to see you, chat. We're glad you guys are here. Oh, and by the way, when we do these episodes, most likely they will be on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. So if you are in your work day toward the end of the day on a Thursday and you want to jump in here with us, feel free to do that because this is when we'll be putting out our content. So we'll see you guys next time. Stay safe out there in that crazy, crazy galaxy. Bye, everybody.
Listening to the podcast. We hope that you enjoyed this show.
Did you know that parodies are copyright protected?
Tell a friend and review
on iTunes
or other services. Dave and Tom excited for Starfield. Let's all speculate and wear no shoes.
Hey, Why aren't we wearing any shoes?
Because shoes rhymes with iTunes, and that's the best I could think of.